What do we got going on tonight, guys? Well, as you can see, I got some of my chemistry stuff out, and we're going to do a silver reduction. If you're not familiar, silver reduction is basically where we're going to take the silver metal and we're going to turn it into a liquid form. Now, you might be asking yourself, why would you want to do that? Well, because sometimes your silver is not pure, and it's connected to other metals. And what we're going to do is we're going to melt that silver to a liquid, and all this other metal that is not silver will remain. And then we can take that liquid silver and turn it back into a metal. So if you're wondering how that's done, well, keep on watching and I'll show you. So first of all, you might be asking yourself, what exactly are these things? And why do they have silver on them? Well, these are actually parts of a contact switch, or on and off switch, if you will. And you can find these in breakers, transfer switches, and pretty much anything that deals with high amperage and high voltage, where it disconnects and reconnects. Now, the reason being that they use the precious metals is because if I was just to use some type of other metal that can conduct that extreme heat every time it connects and disconnects, that metal would just melt in a matter of a few times. Now, with the precious metals, they have a higher conductive rating and they don't get as hot. So they have more times to connect and unconnect before those tabs would get damaged and you would have to replace the switch. Now, however, you get bad components that still have quite a bit of silver, as the case with all these. Now, usually I'll wait until I have a lot more silver to do a reduction because the acid that's used is not cheap. However, I figured let's make a video. Alright, first things first, you're always going to wear safety gloves. You definitely don't want to get any of that acid on you. And then, other than that, you're going to want to make sure that you have a safety bath. And that's just basically going to be distilled water in a container so you can neutralize anything that comes in contact with acid. As well as some distilled water on standby, as we'll be using it. You're going to need a measuring cylinder because the measurements of water per acid are going to be exact per the amount that you're trying to reduce. And then, of course, we're going to have the reaction vessel, and we're also going to have a funnel that is, of course, glass, so no chemicals will do any damage. So let's go ahead and get Alright. All the connecting and disconnect tabs are in there. So let's go get it, put it back in our mount. So now what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to fill this till it just barely covers all those tabs in water. And we're going to be using distilled water, of course. Always use distilled water so it doesn't have any minerals in it. If there's any unexpected minerals in the water, it could have a bad reaction with the acid or unexpected reaction, and that's definitely something that you don't want. Now, also one thing to take note is once the action or reaction actually starts, it's going to be producing a very toxic gas. So you definitely don't want to be doing it in an enclosed area like I'm doing it here. Once the reaction starts and I get it on video, I'm going to be moving it outside to vent in an open space while the reaction occurs. Now, the reaction will take, depending on how much silver you're doing, it could take anywhere from 8 hours up to 3 days, just depending on how much silver in my experience. So let's go ahead and we're going to go ahead and fill the measuring cylinder. Now, we definitely want to take note of how much water we're using, so we know how much acid that we're going to want to use. So I'm going to start off with just, let's go on a little bit more. Yeah, that's pretty close. So on this graduating cylinder, I'm going to be at 30 milliliters. I believe this is milliliters. Yes, it is milliliters. And we're going to go ahead and pour that in. Shake this around a little bit, make sure all those are at the bottom. And let's see. It does look like they are all covered with water. See if I can get a close up here. Alright. So as I was saying before, it only took about 30 milliliters of water to cover it. So with the ratio, it's going to be a 1 to 3. So if I use 3 parts of water, I'm going to use 1 part of acid, or in this case, just 1 milliliter. Now I am going to still this, as I definitely want to be careful when pouring the acid. Now I do keep the acid in that metal container down there, as you definitely don't want to accidentally spill it or have it come in contact with something that you don't want it to. So this is going to be the acid that we're going to be using, and it is nitric acid. The label's a little old there, I don't know if you can actually read that. Now you can get this stuff pretty much anywhere. Funny enough, Amazon, which is where I got this, and eBay and all kinds of other things. Obviously, the more you buy, the better discount you get. I actually bought 6 of these, and it was right around $200. Each one of these is going to be 1 liter. And I was able to do about, I would say, 20 ounces per a bottle. So it does go quite a bit if you use it sparingly. Alright, let's go ahead and shift everything back over here. Definitely be careful and take precautions whenever you're using this stuff. I would even recommend using eye protection. And it does have a very potent smell. You definitely don't want to smell that. So as I said before, I'm just going to use 1 part to 3, which is going to be 1 milliliter in this case. Put that back in the lockbox immediately. Alright. And then I'm going to go ahead and pour that acid right in there. Now, as soon as I do it, you're going to start to see that reaction occur. Now, just to be safe, I'm going to put a little bit more of distilled water in there, just to help rinse out that beaker. Or a graduating cylinder, I should say. All right, science people, don't kill me. I'm gonna go ahead and dunk that in my safe bath. Now, if you can't see that already, there is a reaction occurring, and that acid is breaking down that silver. And that's easily told by the bubbling, as well as you can already see that blue coming out. Now, once it's done, that water will be a very, very sparkling deep blue. It's almost very gorgeous. But yeah, so right now it is going to be vaping extremely toxic gases. I don't know if you can kind of see that hue of brown in the glass there. But if I'm not mistaken, I believe the gas that is going to be emitting is a carbon dioxide, but I could be wrong on that. I'll have to look it back up. But yeah, now that that action or reaction is occurring, I'm going to go ahead and get that outside so it can vent, so I'm not breathing it. So, Explorer, how do you get that silver back to a solid? Well, you use copper. So once the silver is completely turned to the liquid, you actually just put a piece of copper, and I do recommend a thick piece or a big solid piece, because as the silver turns back to a solid, it's actually going to eat away at that copper, as the copper will actually create a chemical reaction that turns the silver back to a solid. And then once it turns to a solid, it kind of looks like a grayish powder. Then you'll want to use something like this, a Schumer funnel, and that just has a vacuum draw, so it allows the suction and the draining of whatever you put through that filter system to happen a lot quicker. Otherwise, trust me, I've had experience just using the glass funnel, and it took almost 3 days just for one funnel to get completely through. This guy, I can run about 5 or 6 full 200 milliliters through it before I would have to switch out the filter, and it does it in a matter of minutes. It's unbelievably great. Expensive, but great. But once you get all the silver powder collected in the filter, when you run it through this guy, you then take that silver powder, got a couple over there drying right now, but you'll let them dry. Once the silver is completely dry, then you're going to want to use a smelter, and you will just put it in a crucible. Let's see, I believe I got one over here somewhere. Yeah, crucible here. Yeah, bear with me trying to do this one-handed. And it will turn it back to a solid state of silver. And I got a couple pieces inside. I'll show you what they look like once you actually pour them out of the crucible. Yeah, so here we go. I got a couple small pieces here, and this is what it'll look like straight out of the crucible. I mean, depending on how you pour it. I just poured this straight into water to let it cool real quick. A couple other pieces, some of it mixed with sand. Missed the water container there when I was pouring. But yeah,